You're listening to Cinema Central, and as always, I'm your host, DJ Ace. And Shazam, the newest film in the DC universe by Warner Bros., came out on April 5th. I went and saw it, and sorry, it has taken me a while to post this review, but the wait is over. So here are my initial thoughts on the film. The film Shazam follows Billy Batson as he gets the magical powers to transform into a grown-up superhero, and there are plenty of antics that ensue on this young hero's journey. Shazam is a wonderful film full of good feels but also serious subjects. The chemistry between Zachary Levi, Asher Angel, and Jack Dylan Grazer is rock solid, and all three are standout performances. Mark Strong brings out a dynamic performance as the villain Dr. Savannah. The film also doesn't shy away from delivering some very surprising reveals straight from the source material. And finally, with its PG-13 rating, there are some intense and dark elements in the film that the only thing keeping it from being another broody DC film is the massive amounts of comedy thrown on top of it. So those are my initial thoughts. If you haven't seen it, I would very much recommend it, with the caveat that this is still a very PG-13 film, so please think twice before bringing your kids to this flick. Otherwise, as always, spoilers are ahead this point onward. So if you haven't seen the film, turn back now, go check it out this weekend, and then come back here, listen to the review, and give it a like while you're at it. What I thought was interesting about the movie was that it actually opens up with the villain's backstory. A young Dr. Savannah is in the back of the car when he gets teleported away, and the wizard gives the backstory of the film. It is here that he mentions that the council had once chosen a champion previously, and that they chose poorly because that champion unleashed the 7 deadly sins upon the world. This is a subtle reference to the villain Black Adam, who is going to be played by none other than Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. This one event sets into motion Savannah's ambitions for the rest of the film. It is also funny that his father is played by John Glover, who famously played Lionel Luthor in the TV show Smallville. Speaking of the 7 deadly sins, these demons are the reason I would recommend paying attention to the rating guide. The movie is PG-13, and they are probably the main reason. One of them kind of bites a person's head off in the film in front of you. So yeah, they were kind of intense. And if you don't know what the 7 deadly sins are, they are as follows: pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth. And speaking of the sins, I know this movie is pulling this stuff all straight from the comics, but they mix a lot of different theologies and mythologies into this character. For example, it goes by really quickly in the movie, but the wizard lists all the powers of Shazam when he gives Billy the powers. If you miss it, here's what they mean. The powers of Shazam: the S stands for wisdom of Solomon, H, strength of Hercules, A, stamina of Atlas, Z, power of Zeus, A, courage of Achilles, and M, speed of Mercury. And what do you get? Shazam! So yeah, they are mixing a lot of different things here, but it's fine, just makes the whole thing very unique. I mentioned there was some great chemistry between the main characters in the film. Not only do 2 actors have to play the same character, but I also love Shazam's interactions with Freddy. And speaking of Freddy, they do this interesting thing with his character, and I'm sure there's a specific literary term for it, but he is crippled in this film, and yet it's Billy that gets the superpowers, and at one point Freddy calls him out on it, because as Billy makes it obvious, he has no idea how to be a superhero, but Freddy is like a diehard fan. And the other thing that makes Freddy's character so interesting to me is that in the classic hero story, there's always a guide that informs the hero of what to do, and Freddy fulfills this role very nicely. I mentioned that this film deals with some pretty major themes, chief among them being family, especially with a lot of our characters being foster kids. They also touch on bullying for a minute as well. So I think this movie, while a good superhero film, has some really good things to say aside from the action and comedy. If by some chance I never mentioned it, I keep a playlist of themes from these superhero films, so I added the theme for Shazam to the playlist, and I must say it's a pretty good track. I noticed the music quality in this film while I was watching it, but sitting to it and listening to it on its own is something I would encourage you to do. So I think the last point is a quick history lesson for the character. My understanding is that way back in the way, a company named Fawcett Comics published a new character that they named Captain Marvel. Well, funny enough, DC Comics sued them because they felt it was a ripoff of Superman. DC won that suit and then later on bought the rights to the character, and Captain Marvel was reborn later on under the DC Comics label. However, there was a monkey wrench in the whole thing, as Marvel Comics had also started a character named Captain Marvel, whose film came out March 8th for the MCU. The reason this was able to go on for so long is that Marvel had the rights to the name Captain Marvel, but DC had the rights to the character, and neither wanted to go at it in court. Eventually, DC renamed the character to just Shazam in their new 52 reboot. Why this matters to the movie is that the key word to transform from Billy Batson to Shazam is the word Shazam. So in the movie, they couldn't really name the character based off his secret passphrase, so they kept making jokes in the film about what to name his superpowered form, which is why we ended up with Captain Sparklefingers. And a quick note, if you really haven't seen this film and are still listening at this point, then please turn back now because I'm talking all the end of the movie spoilers. In the third act of the film, Shazam throws down with Sirvana and the 7 deadly sins. Now, I'll admit I don't know a ton about Shazam, but I knew about the Shazam family, and honestly, I did not think they would go through with that in this first film. But they did. Billy makes the decision to use the wizard staff to give his entire foster family the Shazam powers, and it is a seriously fun and epic moment in the film, and kudos to the studio for going with it on their first film. So now it is time to discuss the post-credits, because everyone is doing it these days. So in the movie, we find out that Freddy is a big Superman fan, and also wanted Billy to sit with him at lunch as Shazam, but Billy didn't do it. So to make up for it, Shazam brings Superman to lunch with him, and Freddy's jaw drops. What is funny is that they shoot Superman from the neck down because it wasn't Henry Cavill. In fact, no one even knows if Henry Cavill is going to continue to play Superman moving forward. But the fact that they put Superman's character in the film is very reassuring that they are still looking for some small interconnectivity between their films. Finally, at the end was a super deep cut as Sirvana gets a visit in prison from a talking worm creature. This alien can be spotted earlier in the film in the Wizard's Cave. He is called Mr. Mind and he wants to conquer the galaxy. Go figure. So all in all, Shazam is a very fun, very heartwarming hero's tale with important themes and intense action. If you still haven't seen it, I would recommend it. Thanks for listening, and be sure to follow me on the socials at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Ace Cinema Central, and I will see you on the next one.
Booyah!